It's not what you saw, it's what you felt, in that uncomfortable silence, in the cold reply, in the presence that felt like absence. Some betrayals begin long before a bed is shared. They start in the averted eyes, the half-baked excuses, the small voids that grow into canyons, and the worst part, sometimes you feel it all and still choose not to see it. Why? Have you ever felt like you were being cheated on, long before the truth came out? Sometimes, what destroys a relationship isn't the shouting. It's the silence, not the fights, but the distance, and not the ending, but the doubt. That moment when everything looks the same on the outside, but deep down, you know something's off. A touch that no longer comes, a glance that turns away, a hug that doesn't warm anymore. For a long time, Sarah believed love meant patience, that everything was just a phase, that all she had to do was hold on, take a deep breath, and things would go back to normal. Because that's what we're taught, right? That long-lasting relationships are built on sacrifice, that true love endures everything, that it takes compromise to keep it going. But no one ever tells you what happens when compromise turns into disappearance, when, in trying to save someone else, you start to lose yourself, and even then, you stay. You stay because you're afraid you're overreacting, afraid of being judged, and most of all, afraid of the truth, afraid to look the person you love in the eye and realize that the connection is already gone. Because when a woman feels that something is wrong, she already knows. She just doesn't want to believe it, because believing means facing the pain. And sometimes it's easier to pretend everything's fine than to admit it might all be over. This is the story of a woman who didn't find out about the betrayal through a scream or a confession. She saw it in the details, in the "I'll be right back," in the eyes that couldn't meet hers, in the excuses that never added up. And what she did with that pain might change the way you see everything around you. Now tell me, have you ever felt invisible in your own relationship? Have you ever felt like you were going crazy just because no one confirmed what you knew deep down? Write in the comments. Your story might be more common than you think. It all started with a crumpled piece of paper on the car floor. It wasn't anything major. A restaurant receipt, forgotten on the floor of the passenger seat. But there was something strange about it. Not because of the restaurant itself. Sarah knew the place. It was an elegant bistro, out of town, where she and Ryan had gone only once, years ago, to celebrate their wedding anniversary. The problem was something else, the date. It was from last week, on a Wednesday night, and according to Ryan, that night, he was in a late meeting at the office. Sarah picked up the paper, adjusted her glasses, read it again, and felt her stomach turn. $234, a full dinner for 2 people. Wine, appetizer, main course, dessert. The kind of dinner you don't forget. The kind of moment that usually involves someone special. And the name at the top of the receipt, reservation for R. Bennett. She swallowed hard, folded the paper, and slipped it into her pocket without thinking. Her heart started beating faster, but her mind tried to stay calm. It was nothing. It could have been a client meeting, a dinner with an investor. Ryan always said he needed to make connections, and that the fitness market was all about relationships and visibility. But the truth is, in recent months, these relationships had been showing up more often than usual. Sarah sat on the living room couch and stayed there for almost half an hour, holding that folded paper in her pocket as if it were a ticking time bomb. Why didn't he throw it away? Why lie about working late if he hadn't done anything wrong? But what bothered her most wasn't the paper. It was the feeling, that impression that something was being hidden, not by accident, but on purpose, as if a new story was being written, and she was no longer part of it. She wasn't paranoid, never had been. She was observant, attentive, the kind of woman who notices subtle changes, a new cologne, a different outfit, a more impatient mood. And lately, Ryan had been strange, less present, more on his phone, and with faster responses, as if he already knew what to say. He had changed his gym schedule, said morning workouts were too crowded and he preferred going at night, started leaving his phone face down, began getting home always after 10, stopped talking about his day like he used to, and even during meals together, he seemed distant, replying to messages while saying he was handling work stuff. That night, Ryan came home later than usual. Came in with the same story as always. Traffic was horrible, the meeting ran long, the client was difficult. Sarah nodded, smiled, and didn't say anything. She just watched. He took off his coat, gave her a mechanical pat on the shoulder, and went straight to the shower. There, in the living room, with the TV still on mute, she reached into her pocket and touched the paper again. That wasn't just a receipt. It was a crack. Small, subtle, but real. And what she didn't know yet was that crack was just the beginning, because some stories don't collapse all at once. They fall apart in pieces, silently, one detail at a time. The next day, Sarah didn't say anything. The receipt remained folded in her purse, like a question without an answer. But something inside her had changed. Now, her eyes watched more closely. Her listening became sharper, and every word Ryan said sounded like a code to be deciphered. It was Friday morning. Ryan left early, as usual, saying he was giving a trial class at the gym before the team arrived. The gym was his pride and joy. A modern, well-lit space with new equipment and a loyal clientele. It was what he called his second home. Sarah decided to stop by late that morning. Not that she had a clear reason, but she remembered there was a supplement in the cabinet of his office at the gym, the same one that had run out at their house 2 days earlier. Ryan had said he'd bring more that week, but since he'd been getting home late and always in a rush, he had ended up forgetting. She thought, if he's late again today, at least I'll already have taken care of it. When she got there, the receptionist smiled, greeted her as usual, and said excitedly, "Have you met Brittany? The new personal trainer Ryan hired?" Sarah forced a smile and shook her head. "Not yet." The receptionist discreetly pointed to the back of the room. "She's right there, teaching a functional class. She's great. People are loving her." When Sarah looked, she saw a woman with golden skin, a toned body, high ponytail, tight shorts, a confident voice, young, self-assured, beautiful. The kind of woman who seemed like she hadn't yet experienced any heartbreak in life. She laughed loudly, corrected the student's posture with gentle touches, and seemed to command the space with ease. Brittany. Sarah stood still for a few seconds, watching that woman. She didn't know why, but her body tensed up. It was as if something in the air shifted. That presence stirred a strange unease inside her. It wasn't jealousy. It felt more like a warning. Ryan appeared shortly after, coming from the weight room. He was wearing the gym's black t-shirt, sweaty, hair messy. When he saw Sarah, he looked surprised. Not exactly happy, nor worried. Just surprised. "Hey, what are you doing here? I remembered the supplement that ran out at home. You still had some in the cabinet in your office. Since you might get home late again, I figured I'd just stop by and grab it." He nodded, slightly awkward. "Sure, it's there. Go ahead." As she walked toward the small office in the back of the gym, she noticed Brittany watching her from a distance. There was no provocation in her gaze, nor warmth. It was neutral, cold even, but direct. In the room, Sarah found Ryan's cabinet, but she didn't even touch the supplement. She just stood there for a few moments, alone, holding her breath. Part of her wanted to go through his whole bag. The other part wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible. Deep down, she already knew. If she dug deeper, she would find something. When she came out of the room, she saw Ryan and Brittany talking near the treadmill. He was saying something while she laughed and lightly touched his arm, a quick, casual gesture. But Sarah saw it, and it burned. She drove home in silence, slowly. No music, just her thoughts pounding, trying to convince herself she was overthinking. But something wouldn't let her. And that night, when Ryan came home and lay down next to her like nothing had happened, Sarah closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. But inside, there was no rest, only doubt. And from that day on, she would start paying attention to everything. Sarah had always had a sensitivity that made other people uncomfortable. When something was out of place, she felt it. She couldn't explain it. She didn't need proof, witnesses, or confessions. Just a silence, a sideways glance, a tiny detail, and she knew. Ryan used to say she was too intense, that sometimes she saw things that weren't there, but deep down, he knew she did see what he was trying to hide. After the visit to the gym, the pieces started shifting inside her. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but firmly. She tried to push the thoughts away, thought maybe she was overreacting, that the tension could be in her head. But the signs were everywhere. That week, she started noticing everything. The different smell on his clothes, a sweet, feminine perfume that wasn't hers, the workout towel thrown in the back seat of the car with a stain she couldn't identify, his phone locked with new passwords, always face down. Ryan, who used to leave his phone lying around the house, now seemed glued to it. And the workouts. He was going to the gym more than usual. Strange times he never used to go. Sometimes, Sarah would call his phone and it would go straight to voicemail. Later, he'd say he was with clients, that the workout had been intense, that he forgot the phone in the office. There was always a justification. There was always an explanation. But his body said what his words didn't. The impatience, the nervousness, the increasingly robotic gestures. Ryan no longer touched her the way he used to. The good morning kiss had turned into a rushed mumble. Family dinners became 2 separate meals. She in the kitchen, him in the office or eating straight from the fridge. What hurt the most wasn't the distance itself. It was his attempt to act like everything was the same, as if she were naive, as if she couldn't tell that he was more distant than ever. As if life had gone into autopilot, and she was left there, alone, inside a hollow relationship, trying to remember when everything started to fall apart. One night, Sarah tried to start a conversation. They sat on the couch, side by side, and she mentioned the weather, the routine, brought up anything just to break the ice. Ryan replied with one-word answers. His eyes were on his phone, laughing at some message, completely detached from her presence. When she asked what was so funny, he simply said, "Just the team, group, chat jokes," and slipped the phone into his pocket. Behind that simple gesture, there was a whole universe, a detachment that could no longer be ignored. Sarah got up, said she was going to bed, and he didn't even look at her, just muttered a mechanical, "Good night," without even turning his face. She lay down, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. It was like living with a stranger who knew all her weak spots, and somehow was using each of them against her. And in that moment, something changed inside her. The intuition stopped being just a gut feeling. It started turning into certainty. But before she acted, she needed to see more. There was something cruel in the way Ryan pulled away. He made it seem like it was Sarah who was creating the distance. Always busy, always exhausted, always with something urgent keeping him from being present. And when she tried to talk, he responded with coldness disguised as logic. "You've been too sensitive. You need to relax. You're seeing problems where there aren't any." Those phrases became routine, and over time, they didn't just wear down the trust she had in him, but also the trust she had in herself. On Sunday morning, she made pancakes, fresh juice, set the table like she used to at the beginning of their marriage. The sunlight came in through the kitchen window, and for a moment, she wanted to believe there was still time. That maybe all it would take was a gesture, a connection, something simple. Maybe he was just stressed. Maybe what they needed was to reconnect. But Ryan came downstairs in a hurry. Said he was late for a training session with a new client, drank the juice standing up, ignored the pancakes, and left. "Let me see if I make it back in time for lunch." He didn't. He sent a short message in the middle of the afternoon, saying the session had run long and he'd eat over there. No explanation, no photo, No call, just a dry message, sent like it was any other notification. Sarah sat alone at the table and looked at the still full plate. She felt a mix of anger, abandonment, and a sadness that seemed to weigh in her bones, but she forced herself to eat. She was tired of letting his absence control even her appetite. The food tasted like nothing, as if the emptiness she felt inside had swallowed her sense of taste. That night, when he came home, she tried again, asked how the training had gone, if the client was new at the gym, if it was worth the effort on a Sunday. But Ryan replied with short phrases, almost irritated that she was even asking. "It was just a training session, Sarah. Why all the questioning?" She stayed silent. That had become the new rule. The more she tried to get close, the more he pulled away. The more she tried to keep them connected, the more he insisted on creating a gap between them. Sarah started asking herself where she went wrong. Had she stopped being interesting? Was she being too annoying? Controlling? Demanding? After all these years together, had he just gotten tired of her? She looked at herself in the bedroom mirror that night and had a hard time recognizing who she saw. The tired face, dark circles under her eyes, the constantly on-edge expression. She looked like a woman waiting for an answer that never came, waiting for a sign that there was still something to save, but the sign didn't come. The next morning, Ryan left the house while it was still dark, said he had a meeting out of town with a potential investor, and once again, he gave no details. Once again, he left Sarah with the questions, the silence, and a growing anxiety that no longer fit inside her chest. And it was there, sitting at the table in front of a cold, forgotten cup of coffee, that something clicked. It was no use waiting for the truth to come to her. Maybe it was time to go after it, and see with her own eyes what her heart had already been screaming in silence. On Wednesday, Sarah woke up with her mind made up. It wasn't a simple decision. There were no arguments, no accusations, no tears. It was a silent, mature, and cold decision. She needed to find out on her own. She needed to face what she had been feeling for weeks. The night before, Ryan had mentioned that he'd be traveling the next day to attend a conference on gym management, out of town. He said he'd stay the night and come back late Thursday afternoon. She listened carefully, didn't question anything, just stored every word, every expression on his face, like someone memorizing a story that would later be checked line by line. The morning of the trip, she made his breakfast like always, the same whole wheat toast with peanut butter, the same fresh orange juice. She watched as he got ready, wearing the polo shirt he usually wore for professional events. He spent a bit more time than usual in front of the mirror, fixing his hair, picking out his cologne. "Good luck at the conference," she said with a restrained smile. "Thanks, it's going to be intense, but I think it'll be worth it." He kissed her forehead and left. Half an hour later, she left too. She didn't tell anyone, drove to the gym, parked across the street, and sat there inside the car, engine off, heart racing. The side entrance, which led to the staff parking lot, was open, and that's where, 20 minutes later, she saw Ryan arrive, alone, no suitcase, no backpack, no travel clothes, wearing the same gym t-shirt he always wore for evening sessions. He walked in smiling, looking at his phone. He seemed relaxed, at ease. There was no urgency, no stress, no sign of a man headed to a conference. Sarah swallowed hard, her chest tight, hands trembling. But she didn't leave the car. She just stayed there, watching, thinking. Maybe he was just stopping by to grab something before hitting the road, she thought. Maybe he forgot a document, a spreadsheet. She wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. Because when you love someone, the truth isn't what you want to see. It's what you try to deny until the very last moment. But the hours passed, and Ryan didn't leave. Quite the opposite. Around 11, he appeared again at the gym's door with Brittany. They were laughing, talking far too close, and then they disappeared inside. Sarah couldn't sit there anymore. She started the car, drove slowly to a nearby cafe, and sat for over an hour without touching the tea she'd ordered. Her eyes were blank, reliving every little lie from the past few weeks. Suddenly, everything made more sense: the late-night workouts, the disappearing acts, the irritability, the distance. It was like a puzzle was finally coming together. But the pieces cut deep. That afternoon, when Ryan sent a generic photo of an empty conference room with the caption, "Waiting for the lecture to start," Sarah simply replied, "Good luck out there." She didn't need evidence anymore. She didn't need a dramatic scene. She just had to observe and understand, because sometimes a well-told lie is easier to swallow than a poorly told truth. But not every lie lasts forever, and she was about to find that out. On Friday, Sarah woke up with a bitter taste in her mouth and a restless heart. The photo Ryan had sent the day before, the one from the supposed conference, still hovered in her mind like a shadow. The plastic chair, the white wall without any logo, no faces, no signage, nothing to confirm the location. Everything was too generic, too cold, almost as if he had staged it not just to deceive her, but to fool his own conscience. She didn't talk to anyone about it, not even her closest friend, the one she shared everything with. She felt ashamed to be living through this, ashamed for doubting, ashamed for not having the courage to act with the strength she always thought she had. And most of all, ashamed to be starting to accept that maybe love wasn't enough to hold them together anymore. That thought alone was painful to admit, even to herself. That afternoon, while sipping coffee, she opened Instagram without thinking. She wasn't looking for anything, just trying to escape the storm inside. She scrolled through her feed mindlessly until she stopped. The name appeared on the screen as if fate had pushed it there. Brittany Adams. She clicked on the profile. Most posts were typical: workouts, fitness tips, smiling selfies, motivational quotes, everything too perfect, too staged. But there was something different about a recent post. The photo had been uploaded just a few hours earlier. Brittany smiling, in a bikini, standing in front of an infinity pool. In the background, the ocean. The caption read, "The kind of break the mind also deserves." But what caught Sarah's attention was the tagged location, Lakeview Resort and Spa, the same place Ryan said the conference would be held. Sarah zoomed in. She scanned every detail of the scenery, the reflection in Brittany's sunglasses, the type of towel on the lounge chair. And then she saw it. In the background, reflected in the glass door of the bungalow, a man with his back turned, black shirt, short hair. The posture, the walk. She didn't need to see the face. She would recognize that body anywhere. It was Ryan. For a few seconds, she sat still, the phone trembling in her hand. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the phone against the wall like a scene from a soap opera. She just felt an enormous emptiness, as if something inside her had quietly shattered. It was no longer suspicion, no longer intuition. It was fact. It was proof. It was real. The lie was no longer in his words. It now had shape, color, a date, a face, and a location. The betrayal had a face, an image, a paradise setting where he smiled, far from her, far from the home he claimed to treasure just a few months ago. Sarah left the house without a destination, drove through unfamiliar neighborhoods, staring out the window without seeing, parked in front of a park and sat there, hands on the wheel, head spinning. She tried to remember when it had all started, when she stopped being a priority, when he chose to lie instead of talk. But there were no answers, because sometimes betrayal starts long before the touch. It begins with neglect, with affection withheld, with the coldness that settles in little by little and turns a home into a frozen field. And now she knew, and she could no longer pretend not to know, but knowing still wasn't enough. The question that now echoed louder was even harder. What do you do with the truth? The next day, Ryan came home in the late afternoon, just like he had promised. His punctuality was almost offensive, as if simply being on time could erase all the lies he had left along the way. Sarah was sitting on the front porch when he arrived. She held a book in her hands but wasn't reading. She was observing, thinking, constantly. Inside, a storm. Outside, total calm. The kind of control only someone who's been deeply hurt can maintain. "Hey," he said, opening the gate with a tired face. "I survived the conference." She looked up, forced a slight smile, and replied, "That's good." Ryan entered the house as if nothing was wrong. He kissed her lightly on the cheek, took off his shoes in the hallway, and went straight to the bathroom. Sarah glanced at him as he passed, trying to read him. Was he tense? Worried? Guilty? But no. He looked relaxed, too relaxed for someone who had lived a lie. At dinner, he tried to keep the conversation going. He talked about the lectures, the guests, even made up a silly joke that, on another night, might have made her laugh. But that night, nothing sounded real. Every word felt rehearsed, every smile, a badly acted scene. He even mentioned some coffee break where he met a manager from Texas. Generic name, generic story, all too generic. Sarah just nodded. She watched it all with a clinical eye, like someone watching a play for the 100th time. It wasn't about believing anymore. It was about seeing how far he would go with the lie. After dinner, he offered to do the dishes, as if that could make up for the distance. She let him, stayed in the living room, looking at her phone, the photo of his reflection in Brittany's suite window still open. She hadn't deleted it, hadn't saved it either. She just let it sit there, floating, a living reminder of what was now undeniable. It was almost an emotional mirror. Any time she felt tempted to doubt her own intuition, all she had to do was look at the image, a photo so quiet and yet so final. No caption needed. She knew exactly what she saw. Later, when they were in bed, Ryan started a conversation. He asked if she was okay, if she had missed him. And for a few seconds, Sarah wanted to scream, throw it all in his face, show the picture, ask how he could lie so easily while looking her in the eye. But she took a deep breath and simply replied, "I'm a little tired tonight. I think I'll fall asleep fast." She turned to her side. Silence. Ryan muttered a "good night" and soon fell asleep. Or pretended to. Hard to tell. Sarah stayed there, eyes wide open, body tense, heart torn between two urges. To confront or to see more. Explode or wait. Act or observe. The truth was already right in front of her, but doubt still lived in her reaction. She stared at the dark ceiling for several minutes, his breathing filling the room. She could feel the weight of the lie between them like a third presence, invisible but suffocating. What would Ryan do in the days ahead? Keep up the act, make the lies worse, or surrender to his own mistakes? She didn't know. But in that moment, something inside her whispered, "Keep watching." Because once the confrontation begins, there's no turning back. In the days following Ryan's return, Sarah lived in a constant state of alert, as if every gesture, every word he said, was another piece of a larger puzzle. She no longer expected him to explain anything. She didn't even try to confront him anymore. What she did was observe everything. He smiled more at his phone than at her. Sometimes he walked into the house talking on speakerphone and would quickly hang up the moment he saw her. He'd say it was someone from the team, a work call. But his eyes always gave away something else, discomfort. The connection between them, already fading, now felt irreversible. It was like living with a roommate, a stranger under the same roof, sharing the same habits, but not the same love. The gestures were still there, the good morning, the "I'm heading out," the "be back later," but there was no feeling in any of them. Everything felt automatic and painfully distant. One night, while Ryan was in the shower, Sarah went into his office. She needed to find an old document, or at least that's what she told herself. Opening the left drawer of his desk, she saw a card, a hotel key, with the logo from Lakeview Resort and Spa. Just sitting there, as if it didn't matter, as if it didn't even need to be hidden anymore. She held the card in her hand. Her heart raced, but she didn't cry. She was past tears. What she felt now was something else, a different kind of emptiness, like being pushed out of her own life. That night, she slept on the couch, not because of a fight, not for drama, but because she needed space, distance, air. And there, lying down, staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m, she thought about everything she had silently endured. The small emotional betrayals, the disinterest disguised as routine, the one-word answers, the constant absence, gestures that once felt like affection, now just social obligations. She remembered the beginning, the promises, the plans, the road trips they took with little money, but plenty of love. She remembered when he looked at her like she was everything, and now she barely existed in his line of sight. The realization hit fully when, the next day, he casually said, "I'm thinking about putting Brittany in charge of the personal training team. She's got charisma, presence, the clients love her." That hit Sarah like a punch to the chest. She kept a neutral face, but inside, she exploded. It was like watching the official replacement happen. The full transition. Brittany wasn't just a distraction anymore. She was gaining space, status, power. The feeling of being invisible took over. Sarah spent the rest of the day trying not to fall apart. She replied to texts, laughed at silly videos her friends sent. But it all felt fake. A show for the world. Inside, she felt like she had hit rock bottom. And there was no one there to pull her out, not him, not even herself. And it was in that dark, silent place that a question started to echo. What if she stopped waiting to be rescued? Have you ever felt like you were disappearing inside your own story? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, share this story with them. It might mean more than you think. The betrayal itself was already painful. But what came after? Sarah wasn't prepared to face. Over the weekend, she decided to visit her parents. She needed to get out of the house, breathe different air. Driving through the gate of the house where she grew up always brought a certain sense of relief, even on the worst days. But this time, the relief didn't last. Her mother greeted her with a forced smile and that clinical look, the kind only a mother has, the one that immediately senses when something's wrong. "You look off." "Is something going on?" Sarah hesitated. For a second, she thought about lying, saying it was just stress, the routine, any excuse that might work. But the lump in her throat was too big. Before she realized it, the words started spilling out. Not everything, but enough for her mother to know. The silence that followed was heavier than any reaction. "Sweetheart, cheating is cheating. There's no gray area. You need to stand your ground. Men only respect women who respect themselves." The phrase was firm, but not comforting. It felt more like a rehearsed lesson, an inherited belief, not an act of empathy. That night, Sarah spoke with a few close people, friends, a cousin. Each one said something different. One encouraged forgiveness, because of the time you've spent together, because of your history, because everyone makes mistakes. Another said the opposite. Leave him. He's not going to change. And a third suggested pretending not to know, just to preserve the life she'd already built. Suddenly, everyone had a solution, a way out, a clear path. But none of them carried the real weight of the pain. None of them went to bed next to a man who smiled like nothing was happening. None of them looked into the mirror wondering who they were before all of this started. And that's what crushed her the most. Everyone spoke, but no one listened to what she couldn't say. She also knew that behind some of the advice were fears that weren't even hers. Fear of loneliness, fear of being judged, fear of visible failure. Some advice came from women who had also swallowed betrayals in silence, and now wanted others to do the same, just so they wouldn't feel alone in their own pain. In the end, Sarah was alone with the decision. A decision no one could make for her. And maybe the hardest part was accepting that either choice came with a cost. What would she lose if she forgave? What would she sacrifice if she walked away? On Sunday night, back home, she felt even emptier than when she'd left. Ryan was on the couch watching some random game, as if the world around them hadn't changed. He offered her a glass of wine, like everything was normal. "Wine?" he asked, with the casual tone of someone who owed nothing to anyone. "Not in the mood," she replied. He didn't push, just shrugged, as if her refusal meant nothing, and that hurt more than if he had argued. It was the indifference that burned. His silence said, "You're free to go if you want, but I'm not stopping you." Later, lying in bed, Sarah stared at the ceiling, listening to the sound of the fan spinning. Slowly, painfully, she started to realize something. Maybe love doesn't end in shouting, or fights, or slammed doors. Sometimes, it just dissolves in silence. On Monday morning, Sarah woke up before the alarm. It was still dark. The room felt suspended in time. Ryan slept deeply beside her, breathing with the same calm as always, as if nothing had happened, as if life was exactly how it was supposed to be. She lay there for a few minutes, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her body sink into the mattress. But this time, something was different. For the first time in weeks, she didn't cry, didn't even feel like it. There was a kind of emptiness that, strangely, brought a bit of peace. Not relief, but silence. And in that moment, silence already felt like progress. She got up slowly, careful not to make any noise. In the kitchen, she made strong coffee and stood by the window, watching the morning light begin to spread over the rooftops. The steam from her cup rose slowly, as if time had slowed down just for her. The world seemed to carry on, unaware of the storm inside her. And yet, in that bubble of silence, a different thought emerged. A question that had never taken shape before, but now circled her mind. What if it's no longer about him? She ignored the notifications on her phone. No social media, no news, no messages from friends. She needed space just for herself. A quiet place where she could finally hear her own voice. Everyone else's words had become noise. Too many opinions. Not enough empathy. She sipped her coffee slowly, thinking about how much of herself she'd lost trying to hold on to something that no longer existed. How much she had reshaped her words, her gestures, her desires, just to avoid conflict, not upset, not make things worse. And now, all that remained was the feeling that she had betrayed herself, even before he had. After her shower, instead of putting on the old sweatshirt that had become her uniform on gray days, she chose fitted jeans, a blouse she liked, and tied her hair with more care. She dabbed on a little perfume, a gesture almost forgotten. When she looked in the mirror, she felt a strange sensation. It had been months since she really looked at herself with that kind of attention, that kind of intention. It was like reconnecting with an old friend, someone she missed but barely recognized. She left the house alone, walked aimlessly through a few streets in the neighborhood. The fresh morning air felt lighter that day. She entered a small cafe on a corner she'd never noticed, ordered another coffee, sat near the window, and just watched people pass by, laughing, rushing, living their routines. And there she was, in the middle of it all, trying to remember who she was before becoming Ryan's wife. She pulled out an old notebook from her bag, one she used to scribble poems and random thoughts in. She opened to a blank page and, for the first time in a long while, she wrote, not a rant, not a letter, just loose words, like seeds. And somehow, that was enough. Her phone buzzed. It was Ryan. "Good morning, love. Everything okay over there?" She looked at the screen for a few seconds, didn't reply. Not yet. She sat there a little longer, with the coffee cooling and the pen still in her hand. For the first time, she wasn't trying to figure out what he would or wouldn't do. She was trying to remember what she herself was still capable of doing. And that felt like a good start. Have you ever found yourself trying to rescue who you were before everything fell apart? That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. She spent hours tossing and turning, feeling the pillow grow warm under her head. The ticking of the clock sounded louder than usual. Ryan's breathing beside her was steady, almost irritatingly calm. She stared at the dark ceiling, but what she saw was the reflection of the life she had agreed to live. The silences, the concessions, the crumbs of affection, the doubt that never really went away, the truth hidden behind fear. At dawn, she got up before him, made coffee, walked through the house as if each room spoke something she no longer wanted to hear. It wasn't just exhaustion. It was a deep kind of fatigue, of the soul, of existing. When Ryan came downstairs, she already knew what she needed to say. He walked into the kitchen as if it were just another day. Wrinkled t-shirt, phone in hand, scrolling through emails like the world wasn't about to fall apart. "We need to talk." He paused for a moment. His eyes didn't show surprise, just mild discomfort. "About what?" "About us. About what's left of us." He sat across from her, tried to look open, but his fingers drummed restlessly on the table. His gaze kept drifting, so she went straight to it. "I saw the photo, Ryan, at the resort, with her." For a second, silence filled the room. The ticking clock on the wall seemed to grow louder. He didn't try to deny it, he just sighed. "It's not what you think." She gave a tired smile. "Seriously? You're still going to say that? You don't even have creativity anymore." He shook his head, like he was dealing with an overreaction, like she was just being too sensitive, just another drama he wasn't willing to revisit. "Look, it was a mistake. It's over. It had nothing to do with you. But it did involve you, her, and all the time you took from us to give to her. Don't tell me nothing happened." Ryan tried to argue, throwing vague excuses into the air. "Things were hard. We were distant, but all of it sounded empty, recycled, dead." He spoke like someone signing a document in a hurry, just to get it over with. "And me? Did you ever even consider choosing me?" He didn't answer, and his silence hurt more than any truth. Sarah crossed her arms and took a deep breath. Her voice no longer trembled. Her eyes were steady. "You erased me slowly, Ryan, and I let you. But now, I'm lighting myself back up, and you're not part of that light." He tried to interrupt, but she stood up. "No, just listen. I spent months trying to figure out what you wanted. Now, I only want to figure out what I need. And what I need is not you pretending to be the good guy after breaking me in silence." She grabbed her purse, her keys. Her anger didn't scream. It burned from within, with dignity. "Where are you going?" She smiled without warmth. "To live a little. Something I forgot how to do." And she walked out. In the car, she cried. But it was different now. It wasn't about him anymore. It was for her. For the time she lost. For the woman she let fall asleep. For the self-worth she was finally trying to wake back up. Have you ever been through that? When the most painful part isn't losing someone. It's realizing how much of yourself you lost trying to hold on to them. The world outside went on exactly the same. People hurried across streets, cars honked, cafes opened their doors, and the sky carried the same old clouds. But inside Sarah, everything felt suspended, as if she had stepped out of her life and returned as a spectator of it. She checked into a small hotel, simple, but with a balcony facing the city center. When she entered the room, she dropped her bag on the armchair and stood for a few minutes, just looking around. Bare walls, a neatly made bed, warm yellow lighting, everything was new, and, at the same time, strange. The silence seemed to echo off the walls. It wasn't freedom yet. It was only the beginning of the quiet. She took a long shower, almost like a ritual, washed her body as if trying to scrub off the weight of everything she'd endured. And when she looked at herself in the mirror, naked and wet, she saw the marks of time, of stress, of sleepless nights. But there was something in her eyes, a steadiness, a lack of fear. The expression of someone who still didn't know exactly what she wanted, but was crystal clear on what she'd never accept again. She dressed slowly in something light and sat on the balcony with a cup of hot tea, watching people pass by down below, like someone observing a world she wasn't sure she wanted to belong to anymore. For a second, she wondered how many of those people were living quiet lies, how many were smiling out of obligation, how many, like her, were trying to remember their own names without the shadow of someone else. For years, Sarah had been surrounded by noise, the noise of expectations, of routines, of unspoken demands. Now, there was a vacuum, and as uncomfortable as it was, she knew she had to go through it. The mourning of her former self. She thought about calling someone, letting them know where she was, saying, "I'm fine," even if it was a lie, but she didn't. She didn't want to share this moment with anyone. It was too intimate, too fragile. It was between her and herself. She opened her notebook again, scribbled scattered words, disconnected phrases. Breathe, survive, find meaning, feel hunger for myself again. That was it. She wanted to feel hunger for herself again, to feel the urge to be in her own skin, to reclaim the space she had given up for so long. She closed her eyes for a moment and remembered something small. An old afternoon, alone in a park, reading a book. It was before Ryan, before she started shrinking herself to fit into the space he offered. She remembered the feeling of peace, the breeze on her face, time moving without pressure. That was happiness too, and it had been hers alone. Later, she ordered food to the room, ate alone, sitting on the bed with soft music playing in the background. For the first time in a long time, she didn't check the clock, didn't wait for messages. She didn't wonder if he was worried, if he was calling, if he regretted anything. For the first time, what he felt wasn't a priority. It didn't even matter. Night came slowly, and with it, a kind of peace Sarah didn't yet know how to name. It was a quiet peace, almost painful. But it came with something rare, honesty. For the first time in a long time, she was exactly where she wanted to be. Lost, yes, but present, whole, even in pieces. She lay down slowly, didn't cry, didn't smile. She simply closed her eyes with a tired body and a quiet mind. Tomorrow would be another day, maybe a little lighter, maybe not. But now she knew it was possible to make it through. Have you ever felt that strange kind of loneliness that shows up after a breakup, but somehow comes with an unexpected taste of starting over? The next morning, Sarah woke up with sunlight slipping through the cracks in the curtains. The tangled sheets still carried the faint scent of last night's tea. For a few seconds, before opening her eyes, she let herself forget everything. The hotel, Ryan, the unspoken words. But the silence of the room quickly brought reality back. She got up slowly, still feeling the weight in her body. It was as if every muscle carried the emotional exhaustion of the past few days. In the mirror, puffy face, tired eyes. But strangely, something looked different. She didn't look fragile. She looked alive, raw, maybe, but alive. She decided to go out without a plan, threw on something comfortable, tied her hair up in a messy bun, and slipped into an old pair of sneakers she'd brought in her bag. Before leaving, she glanced at herself in the mirror again. She wasn't exactly sure what she was looking for out there, but deep down she knew, whatever it was, she wouldn't find it inside that room. She took the stairs down and began walking through the streets, like someone who needed to get a little more lost in order to truly find themselves. The morning air was crisp, carrying the smell of fresh bread from a nearby bakery. Trees swayed gently, as if the entire world was waiting, just like she was, inside. She wandered through unfamiliar blocks, found herself inside a small bookstore, the kind with the scent of old pages and wooden floors that creaked under every step. She touched book covers, read back covers, flipped through random pages, as if searching for something, or someone. Maybe, deep down, she was trying to find versions of herself inside someone else's stories. Later, she sat on a park bench and watched a child trying to fly a kite with his father. The string snapped, the boy got frustrated, the father laughed and started over. Sarah smiled, not because of the moment, but because she noticed she was still capable of smiling. The pain was still there, but so was life. It was like something small had begun to move inside her again. She checked her phone. No messages from Ryan, no apology, no plea to come back. And surprisingly, that didn't matter so much anymore. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or anticipation. She felt space. And in that space, something new could grow. She stopped for lunch at an open-air restaurant, ordered something light, ate slowly, watching the world go by. She noticed an older woman sitting alone, reading a book with a glass of wine. She looked at peace. The image stuck with Sarah. Maybe I can get to that point too, she thought. Back at the hotel, she took another shower. Shorter this time, but more intentional. She felt like she was washing off not just the day, but the parts of herself that had grown too used to pain. She lay on the bed with her notebook in her lap. This time, the words flowed more freely. Nothing profound, just thoughts. I still don't know what I want, but I know what I won't accept anymore. I'm not healed, but I'm finally seeing myself. Living can't mean just surviving next to someone who forgets I exist, even while looking right at me. She closed the notebook, rested her hands on top of it, and took a deep breath. For the first time, the air felt whole. No tightness, no fear. The process wasn't pretty. It wasn't light. It was dry, unforgiving, but it was necessary. And more than anything, it was real. On the third day away from home, Sarah woke before the sky began to lighten. For the first time in a long while, her body didn't resist the morning. She opened her eyes and for a brief moment didn't feel the weight of everything that had happened. It was like a quiet pause between who she'd been and who she might become. She dressed simply, tied her hair up, put on her sneakers and headphones, and stepped into the still empty streets. Old songs played, ones she used to love before everything in her life had started revolving around someone else. Each melody felt like a thread, slowly reconnecting her to forgotten parts of herself. The city was slowly waking up, and so was she. She paused near a bakery, watching people rush in and out with warm bags in hand. For the first time in months, her mind wasn't on Ryan, where he was, what he was doing. It was on her, fully, quietly, gently, on her. She stopped at a cafe, ordered a strong coffee and toast, and sat by the window. Took her old notebook out of her bag and began writing freely. Memories, contradictions, pieces of who she was before she began shrinking to make space for someone else. She remembered a teenage version of herself telling a friend, "I never want to depend on anyone to be happy." She smiled at the memory. Bittersweet, distant, but still part of her. Afterward, she walked into a small shop and bought herself a simple silver bracelet with a leaf charm. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like a promise. I'm choosing myself. She also picked up a single daisy from a flower stand and placed it in a glass on the hotel nightstand, an anchor of beauty in a temporary space. Later, she received a message from her sister. "I'm here, whenever you're ready." She took a breath and replied, "Thank you. I'm trying." That reply felt like a quiet victory. That night, she stood under the shower for long minutes, looked at her body, not with shame, but with a sense of reconnection. She knew more hard days would come, that the past might still knock at her door. But for the first time, she realized she didn't have to open it. She knew more hard days would come, that the past might still knock at her door. But for the first time, she realized she didn't have to open it. She didn't miss him. She missed who she was before him. But that pain meant she was finally taking her first step toward freedom. It was Friday afternoon when Sarah decided to stop by the house. Not out of nostalgia, not on impulse, but because she needed to see with her own eyes if that place was still hers, or if it had simply become a space she occupied out of obligation. The car stopped out front, just like always. The grass was slightly overgrown. A few letters stuck out from the mailbox. One of the neighbors waved from a distance, as if nothing had changed. It was strange how the world kept turning, even when we're breaking inside. She entered slowly. The key still worked. The scent was still familiar. The cushions were in the same place, dishes from the last meal still in the sink. It was as if time had paused, waiting for her return to resume. She climbed the stairs in silence. Ryan's clothes were still scattered in the bedroom. His life was still there, exposed in the closet. Yet he wasn't, physically or emotionally. She looked at the bed, at the nightstand with an open book, and didn't feel longing. She felt foreign. That house was no longer home. Sarah opened the suitcase she had taken to the hotel and began gathering her things. A coat she loved, her favorite books, old photos she had left behind. She touched one of them for a few seconds, a frozen, happy moment. She remembered that day, the trip, the beach, the laughter. But now, with distance, she could see her own forced smile, a faint glow. She had already started disappearing back then. As she folded her clothes, she heard the front door open. Ryan had arrived. He came up slowly, maybe already suspecting something. When he saw her there, packing, he paused at the doorframe, confused. "You came back?" She didn't answer right away. She zipped the last bag, stood up, and looked at him. "Just came to pick up what's still mine." Ryan leaned against the doorframe, his expression, tired, maybe guilty, or just lost, but not loving. Maybe he didn't even know what he wanted to say. Still, he tried. "Sarah, wait. We need to talk. Please." She inhaled slowly, then calmly responded. "We already talked, Ryan, for years. In silence, in looks, in gestures you chose to ignore. Now I'm speaking with actions, and my choice is to walk away." He stepped toward her, tried to hold her hand, as if that still held meaning, as if intimacy had survived the distance. "I know I messed up, but I want to fix it. I can't lose you like this. It's not like this, Ryan. You lost me slowly, and only now you realize I'm gone? I left a long time ago. My body was the last part still here." He lowered his eyes, wanted to say more, but didn't know what. Sarah closed the suitcase, stood face to face with him, and said the sentence she'd already been repeating to herself for weeks. "I'm not staying in a place where I have to beg to be seen. I'm sorry. But now, it's for me." She walked down the stairs with steady steps, no drama, no shouting, just an ending that finally accepted itself as an end. Outside, the air felt lighter. The sky still gray, but she could breathe. She started the car. In the rearview mirror, the house grew smaller, more distant, and she didn't feel the urge to go back. The road ahead was open, not certain, not comfortable, but new. And for the first time, she was heading into it alone and at peace. And you, have you ever had to walk away, not just because someone else didn't love you, but because you weren't loving yourself either? 2 months after that final conversation with Ryan, Sarah woke up alone in a bed that was finally hers. The room was small, the apartment still smelled like fresh paint, and almost everything inside had been bought second-hand. But there was one thing that made it all feel new. Every choice had been hers. The blue curtain, the standing lamp in the living room, the little plant by the kitchen window, small decisions, full of meaning. For the first time in years, she didn't have to explain herself, didn't need to ask for permission. That kind of freedom was something she didn't even know existed. The first days without him were hard. She cried in the middle of the night. She wanted to go back. She asked herself that painful question, did I do the right thing? But she kept going, one day at a time, one habit at a time. She started walking in the mornings, slowly, just to feel the wind on her face. Picked up old hobbies, drawing, listening to podcasts, organizing photos. And every time she did something just for herself, it felt like clearing out one more corner of her soul. People around her noticed. Her sister said the light was coming back to her eyes. A friend said, "There's something different about you. You look lighter." And Sarah smiled, not quite knowing how to explain. Maybe it was just that. She was becoming who she never should have stopped being. She started saying no more easily, learned to recognize her own limits, stopped putting herself second just to keep someone else around. And even without big material wins, yet, she felt she was gaining something much greater: herself. One day, she was invited to a gathering with a new group of people. In the past, she would have declined, afraid of feeling out of place. But this time, she went, alone. She was shy at first, but left laughing, with new contacts, and that warm feeling of, "I'm glad I went." Ryan's betrayal hurt less now. It wasn't the center of her thoughts anymore. It felt more like a turning point. The moment her life split into before courage and after courage, and she finally understood. Not all pain is punishment. Sometimes, pain is just the alarm, the sign you stayed too long where you didn't belong. She didn't feel anger toward him anymore, didn't want revenge, but she also didn't miss him, because she'd built a life where he no longer fit, and where she didn't need to shrink to fit anyone else. Now, when she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a broken woman. She saw a woman who fell, cried, doubted, but still got back up. Have you ever stopped to think how many times you've ignored what you felt just to avoid losing someone? Or how many times you delayed your own restart out of fear of what people might say? The truth is, no one else is going to live your life for you. No one else can heal your pain. But you can decide that what hurt you no longer gets to define you. And if you've made it this far, tell me, what was the turning point in your story? That moment when you finally said enough and chose yourself. Or maybe you're still searching for it. Write it in the comments. This space is yours, and your story might help someone else who's still stuck in silence. If this story moved you, if you felt it spoke to you, if it made you think of someone who needs to hear this, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, turn on the notification bell. Every week, we bring emotional stories just like this one. Thank you for staying with me until the end. And now, tell me, are you still waiting for someone to truly see you? Or are you finally ready to see yourself?